You've probably already seen these strange double planes with two cabins and wondered about their odd design. What purpose did these strange double planes serve? These planes are called twin-fuselage planes, and their particular design had several quite useful functions for the world's armies. These have been present practically since the beginning of aviation, and unlike twin-tail planes, these have not disappeared and continue to exist. Many twin-fuselage planes with various uses. The first military twin-fuselage plane was also one of the first intended for combat against German Zeppelins. The first twin-fuselage plane was the English Blackburn Twin Blackburn, which was manufactured in 1914 to fight against German Zeppelins. The two cabins that the Twin Blackburn had were 3 meters apart, so the noise of the engine made the crew have to communicate with signs. It dropped 500-gram incendiary bombs in the hope that some would manage to detonate the gas tanks. But this vanished in 1917 as soon as the airship stopped being used in the conflict. In addition, it turned out to have a much lower performance than expected, having trouble rising to the necessary altitude to position itself over the Zeppelins. Another one that appeared very early in the world of aviation were the Savoia Marchetti, S-55 and S-66 Italians, which were made in 1924, to patrol and to act as a bomber. Shortly after its introduction into service, it began to break speed, payload, and altitude records. But its greatest successes were over the Atlantic, being involved in the first crossings from Europe to America. For example, in 1932, 24 S-55, they flew from Italy to Chicago, United States, in a flight that lasted 48 hours. This was not a seaplane, it was a hydrocano, so it did not have floats that acted as stabilizers, but its buoyancy was obtained from the hull of the plane itself. Its engine was above it and was really gigantic. The 66 was even more unique than the S-55, as it was larger, had 3 engines instead of 1, and was equipped for long flights. It had a bathroom and 7 passenger seats, besides the crew. And it was so good that it was even used as a rescue plane at the beginning of the Second World War. But a plane similar to the S-55 and the S-66, but perhaps a little more interesting. It was the Soviet Tupolev Andrei Nikolaevich Tupolev, 22, which was manufactured in 1934 and was colossal. In fact, it was the largest plane made by the Soviet Union until 1960. It was designed to make long-distance flights. However, by the time the project was finished, it was already obsolete, having a really mediocre performance in the first tests that were done in Sebastopol, 1936. And his project was canceled that same year, as you can see in World War I and in the interwar period. Twin-fuselage planes were specifically designed to be seaplanes or flying boats, thanks to the fact that the twin fuselage gave good buoyancy to these. But all of this would change in World War II with an abysmal amount of twin-fuselage designs emerging. The first of these would be the Henkel G111, which had a twin-fuselage version made to tow heavy German cargo gliders. But a more interesting one would be the Messerschmitt Me 609, which was made in 1941 to replace the German twin-engine heavy fighter Bf 110. The Me 609 was made by combining the fuselages of 2 Me 309, which was a failed German fighter project. It's a bit unsettling just to look at it. Did it really break from the norm? It served as inspiration for other projects like the Bf 109Z, which was the same thing, only with 2 Messerschmitt Bf 109, and a prototype was made from this. But it was damaged in 1943 in a bombing, and its project was abandoned. Italy would also continue with the concept of these planes, creating the ES-EMA 92, but only a prototype would be built. But in World War II, probably. The one that is considered the archetype of the twin-fuselage planes was the F-82 Twin Mustang, which was designed to escort bombers. B-29, Superfortress, and the purpose of combining 2 P-51 Mustangs into a single plane. It was to give it a greater range to be able to keep up with the B-29s in the Pacific. The B-29. Superfortress had a range of 3,600 kilometers, so escorting these monsters was something that no American fighter could achieve at that time. The F-82 was basically 2 P-51 Mustangs, joined at the wing and horizontal stabilizers. It had its first flight in June of 1945. But the war ended 2 months later, so its development slowed down quite a bit, with no war to motivate it. Development continued until 1947, where intelligence data saw how the Soviets already had long-range bombers based on the B-29C, the Tupolev 4. So the Americans felt the need to quickly make more and better strategic bombers, and of course also escorts that were capable of escorting them. In 1948, the F-82 began to be produced for this purpose, as there was no time to design a new long-range fighter. So the F-82 was the last propeller-driven fighter to be put into service by the United States. To test it, it was flown from Honolulu, Hawaii to New York, non-stop, and it arrived without problems in a flight that lasted 14 hours. On this trip, the F-82 covered 5,040 miles, with an average speed of 348 miles per hour. In its operational history, it escorted the Boeing B-50 Superfortress and the Convair B-36 Peacemaker. Later, its roles evolved, leading to the creation of the EFE-82 EFE and the EFE-82. General Electric, which had a radar in the center of the aircraft for target detection. And also the EFE-82 entered combat in Korea with a regular performance, scoring several kills of North Korean fighters. With the introduction of jet engine aircraft such as the F-94 Starfire, the F-82 were relegated to secondary roles such as reconnaissance or ground attack. The final F-82 was retired in Alaska in 1953. By this year, almost 300 F-82 had been produced, probably being the most successful twin-fuselage aircraft in history. If you're wondering how the pilots flew this strange aircraft since it had 2 cabins, well, both cabins had control of the aircraft. The purpose of this was for the pilots to alternate on long flights. But in the versions of the F-82 with radar, the left cabin was for controlling the plane, while the right one was for operating the radar. After the Second World War, the concept of a twin-fuselage plane practically died for quite some time. Many prototypes emerged to carry quite particular loads, such as the Antonov AKS designed to carry space shuttles. However, none of these were ever built. Probably the only current twin-fuselage plane would be the scaled composite White Knight II, which first flew in 2008 and is used to carry the suborbital vehicle Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2nd. And this has an even larger version called Stratolaunch, being the longest flying vehicle in the world today. As we can see, twin-fuselage planes have had different purposes. From being used as floats in hydroplanes to being houses capable of carrying twice the weaponry, and being twice as fast as conventional ones, to being used as transport planes. Generally, when engineers needed to double, whether it was the speed of their planes, the load capacity, or double their autonomy, it seemed quite logical in those times. Take 2 planes and join them to make one, with twice the capabilities of a normal one. And although it may seem stupid, did this concept really work? In most cases, their roles were so varied that it's hard to think of disadvantages and advantages in these. And although the concept was extremely strange, these planes were really good and earned their place in history as a display of true engineering. Remember, this is Guns Club. Thank you so much for watching this video and see you in the next one. Goodbye.